Hi there, this is Eshu. I'm the abbot here at Zenwest Buddhist Society. This Living Zen-podcast is just one of the many resources we've created at Zenwest to make Zen practice and training more available and accessible to people all over the world. Instructional videos, printable resources, and much, much more are also available on our website at www.zenwest.ca. If you're a regular listener, I'd love to hear from you. So please drop me an email at office@zenwest.ca and let me know who you are, how you got started, and what brought you to Zen. Everything we make available in person and online at Zenwest is only possible because of the support of our members and associates, people like you. If the efforts of our community are making a difference in your life, I'd like to invite you to show your support and take part in making it happen by becoming an associate or member of the Zenwest Sangha. You can do this by clicking the Join Us tab on our website at www.zenwest.ca. Thank you for your support, and thanks for listening. Just before I begin formally today, I just want to remind everyone that this is a tradition that has been passed from generation to generation. And a significant component of that ability to be transmitted from generation to generation is attention to form. And for hundreds of years, this form has been transmitted largely orally and through practice, over and over and over again through practice. So when we take up an officer role, it's our responsibility to become familiar with that form, to know that form. I'm wondering what else we can do to support the officers in learning that form. When I was trained and when I first came to this center, the only way to learn the form was by doing it over and over again. And the only way that we knew that we got it right was if the people or the priest in charge didn't say anything. Because if we made a mistake, we were corrected. No! It wasn't pleasant. So, after many years of this kind of training, I realized it was really difficult, particularly for lay people who have lives and who aren't training every day and aren't doing this form every day. Difficult to learn through osmosis, which is essentially the training tool in a monastery. Someone who doesn't know what's going on goes into an environment where most of the people know what's going on, and you have to open your eyes, and you have to pay attention with your ears, and by doing this, you become acclimatized to the form. But in a lay practice center such as ours, it was often the case where there was one person who knew what was going on and a whole pile of people who had no idea what was going on. And so the osmosis didn't work. I've heard we have reverse osmosis water filters, but I have never managed that in a zendo. So I took the time to write down every aspect of form years ago. And since that time, other members, Inos, Shikas, different people who have taken up different roles, have taken those documents and have continued to update them over time. And we email them out to people when they're doing officer roles so that they can do that. So that before a person comes to do the officer role, even if you think, gosh, I've done this 100 times, or it's been a few months since you've done it, that you can look at those notes. And those notes are now available on the World Wide Web through Google Docs. You can go, I'm doing this role today. Let's go check it out. Also, as part of the content of the orientation, we have videos of several aspects of these forms, interactions between the Jikajitsu and the Shoji, all kinds of different aspects of that. We even have a instructionless video of the complete Zendo form for a simple sit that includes things like starting the chants and all that kind of stuff. So I'm really at my wit's end. I don't really know what else I can do as a teacher to make this easier for officers. So I find it disruptive when we have all of these resources available to our officers, and yet on a Sunday formal practice, over and over again, we've got the Ino jumping in to instruct or me jumping in to correct, over and over again with people who've been doing this for a long time. Know your role. Accepting a role, an officer role, is a responsibility. And when we take up a responsibility, it's a commitment. And our commitment is to become familiar with the role. So don't take on the attitude that it's okay to just show up and not know my part. Yes, mistakes happen. Yes, we're going to blow it all the time. Yes, the form is incredibly detailed and we're going to screw up all the time. It's enough to screw up because of momentary lapses in our awareness. But we should also apply our intellect and our effort to clarify that role, because we're serving the whole community. And when we have to stop, or when there's gaps, or when there's pauses, we create a ripple in the mind of every person that's present. And if this happens because of a mistake, a simple mistake, or it happens because we have a moment of unawareness, I think we can all forgive this. It has a very different feeling in the Zendo than when we come and we don't know what happens. We don't know how many clappers, we don't know how many bells, we don't know what comes next. And we're not in a supporting officer role, we're in the lead role. So please, I'm sorry to the newcomers who have to hear Eshu lecture like this, but please, I know that the Ino has come to you over and over again and asked you for this and forwarded you the instructions for the roles. Accept the responsibility for your roles, especially for those of you who are in a path moving towards eldership or ordination. These roles are roles of representing this lineage, this tradition, this family. You must be able to represent this family. You must, at the very least, be able to manifest the external form. If we can't even manage the external form, however, will we grasp the deeper content of this Dharma. So that is a great segue into today's case. So we're going to continue with the gateless barrier. Wumen Guan, case 37. Zhaozhou, the oak tree in the courtyard. Case. A monk asked Zhaozhou, what is the meaning of Bodhidharmas coming from the west? Zhaozhou said, the oak tree in the courtyard. Wumen says, if you intimately realize the essence of Zhaozhou's response, there is no Shakyamuni in the past and no Maitreya in the future. Wumen's verse says, words do not convey the fact. Language does not measure the activity. Consumed by words, your life is lost. Stagnating in phrases, you are bewildered. This is, I think, one of the more well-known cases, koans, in the Gateless barrier. And that may be because it's another case in which Zhaozhou, or as he's called in Japanese, Zhaozhou, gives another succinct, direct teaching. Zhaozhou is perhaps one of the most famous masters in all of the lineage. It's said that he lived to the ripe old age of 120. And while he was renowned for his teaching, it's the tradition in Zen that when a teacher gives transmission, it is because the student has excelled the teacher. Zhaozhou didn't start practicing Zen until later in life. He was already a mature adult. I'm trying to do the math. 20. I think he was around 60 years old when he started practicing Zen. And so he practiced with a teacher for about 20 years, and then he practiced doing pilgrimage, going around and visiting other masters for another 20 years. And then when he was around 100 years old, he figured, okay, now I'm ready to start teaching. He has many sayings attributed to him. One of my favorites from his pilgrimage days was that he would say, if I meet a man as old as 100 and I have something that I can offer, I will teach. And if I meet a boy as young as 6, and there is something that I can learn, I will learn. And I think this is a really wonderful attitude. This case begins with a monk asking Zhaozhou a question. And this is a question that, I don't know if anyone's counted, but what is the meaning of Bodhidharmas coming from the West? This is a question that appears innumerable times in the Gateless barrier and in Zen generally. And it is a very deep question. But I really wanted to talk about it a little bit because we have some newcomers here, and also because I think it's a good reminder, a good refresher to take us back to this fundamental question. Bodhidharma was a teacher. He's called the first patriarch of Zen, or the first patriarch in China. And the story is that he was a monk, a practitioner who practiced in the south of India. And he practiced under a teacher named Prajnatara, which, as an interesting side note, there are many people who are starting to find evidence that suggests that Prajnatara may have been a woman. So it's very interesting. It's always been on the patriarchal lineage, but it's quite possible that Prajnatara was a woman. Anyway, Bodhidharma, for some reason, at the age, somewhere in his 50s, they estimate, decided that he wanted to travel to China to take this transmission of Buddhism, this lineage of Buddhism that we now call Zen, to China. And so from South India, and this is about around, give or take, 50 years, the year 500, Common Era. He got on a ship and he traveled from the southeast coast of India to the southeast coast of China. So you can imagine that at that time, this journey was significant. It took a long time, and a lot of the ships that made that journey never made it. But there he was, and he came to China, likely didn't speak the language. China already had a Buddhist culture, Buddhist monasteries. Many of the schools of Buddhism that were in China at that time were of a much more devotional teaching and an intellectual line than the teaching that Bodhidharma brought. At the time, the emperor of China was a huge benefactor of Buddhism. He paid to have many monasteries built. He paid to have many monks supported. He paid to have many of the sutras and Buddhist teachings translated from Sanskrit into Chinese and disseminated throughout China. There's some great stories about this emperor, actually, because he was really a fascinating person. There's stories about how he built this wonderful monastery across the road from the palace, and he would renounce the throne and all this kind of stuff, and then he'd go across the street to the temple and become a monk. And he'd practice like a monk, and he'd do all the monk stuff. And then when there was some kind of problem in the government, his ministers would write letters to the monastery asking for them to beg him to quit being a monk and come back and be the emperor. And so the emperor would say, "Oh, I could only do that if the kingdom provided so much money to the monastery." And so they would. And so he'd go back across the road to the palace, and then he'd do the emperor thing for a while until he got bored of it, and then he would go back and this would happen periodically. So this is the emperor, and it's really, we have to understand the emperor at this time having a tremendous amount of power over life and death of the citizens of China. So eventually, Bodhidharma, having landed, begins to have all of these interactions with monks, with groups of monks and groups of teachers that are quite astounding to them, because his ability to cut through the intellect, through the externals of Buddhist knowledge and grasp the heart or expose the heart of practice, started to really become renowned. There were many well-known teachers that were just flabbergasted by some of the things he said or expressed in what we now call Dharma combat, or just interactions between two teachers. So the story is that the emperor one day decided that he needed to talk to this person. He had heard stories that a great bodhisattva had come from India, a great teacher, although they also referred to him as the barbarian from the West, because in that time anyone who came from outside of China was obviously a barbarian. So the emperor summoned Bodhidharma to the palace, and Bodhidharma came. And the emperor said to Bodhidharma, "I am Emperor Wu, and I have built, so many 100 monasteries, and through my beneficence, I have sustained so many thousand monks, and because of my scholarly devotion, so many thousand sutras have been translated, and they've been made in so many hundreds of thousands of copies, and they've been disseminated all through China. And as the sutras say, such acts are worthy of merit. And so I want to ask you, O great Bodhisattva, how much merit have I attained?" And Bodhidharma's response was, "None." None whatsoever. So you can imagine that this didn't go over well, or at the very least was kind of astonishing. And I think probably it was more astonishing and probably wasn't just insulting the way that it was delivered, or the way that Bodhidharma stood in presence was probably indicative that there was something more going on than just saying you haven't done anything. Of course, Bodhidharma's fundamental teaching, when asked what is Zen, he said that it is a special transmission outside of the scriptures, without reliance on words and letters, a direct pointing to the human heart and the realization of awakening. This is his elevator pitch of Zen. And so this is his attitude. So the emperor, being completely flabbergasted, says, none whatsoever. He says, well, if there is no merit, then what is the highest holy teaching of the Buddha Dharma? And Bodhidharma responded, vast emptiness. There is nothing holy. Again, probably not what the emperor was looking for, familiar with, expecting. So again, the emperor asked a question. He says, then who is this standing before me? Who are you? To which Bodhidharma responded, there is no knowing. The emperor was aghast, and somehow in this spaciousness, Bodhidharma took his leave, turned around and left. It said that the emperor was going to send people after him. And his minister said to him, do you not... His minister, who's this advisor, who's a Zen priest, maybe the priest from the temple across the road, says, do you not realize who that person was? It was the manifestation of the Bodhisattva of compassion himself. And if you sent your whole army, he would never come back. And so it said that Bodhidharma crossed the Yellow River and went to the north of China. And there's pictures of, it said Bodhidharma crossed the Yellow River. The legend is that he crossed on a single blade of grass. And so there's pictures that you'll often see of Bodhidharma sort of standing on this piece of grass, sort of going across this big river. Anyway, all of this. So we have this character of Bodhidharma, and there's lots of great stories about him. He's the red-bearded barbarian. We used to have and I still have, for Bodhidharma Day, I put it up, a brush painting of Bodhidharma, and the characters say, no knowing, his final response to the emperor. It's important that you know this character. He comes up a lot because he is an embodiment of the essence, or an embodiment of the lively, fundamental spirit of Zen. Oddly, or interestingly, his name, Bodhidharma, means Bodhi is awakening, of course. It's the same root Bud as Buddha. Bodhi, awakening. Dharma means teaching or law. So even his name points to this essential aspect. And there's lots of scholastic research that suggests that it's possible that Bodhidharma as an individual never existed. it's possible that he is a compilation of multiple teachers, that he's just a single body for the collected wisdom of several teachers, perhaps male and female. But we always have this fundamental question when we look at Bodhidharma, because the teaching is that after he left the emperor, he went to northern China and he moved into a cave where he sat facing the wall for 9 years. His practice was simply sitting in this cave in Zazen, until eventually a student arrived that demonstrated his determination. So why? This is the question. Now that we've heard a little bit of the story of Bodhidharma, just a little bit, the question that this monk is asking, and the question that's asked many times in Zen, why did Bodhidharma come from the West? Why? Why did this 50-year-old man, which was significantly old in that era, decide to get on a ship, sail the China Sea to southern China, stick his neck out with the emperor, take another several 100-mile journey across a river into the mountains of Shaolin, and live in a cave for 9 years? Seems like an odd thing to do, doesn't it? Why? This question is asked over and over again. See if I can come up with a few. I know 5 has it. You know, when we're hanging out of the tree by our teeth, that's the question that's asked by the person who comes to the bottom of the tree. Why did Bodhidharma come from the West? Linji's also asked this. Why did Bodhidharma come from the West? And he responded, if he had a purpose, he could not have saved even himself. And Zhaozhou, he's known as the silver-tongued master. Zhaozhou said, the oak tree in the courtyard. It's often translated as the cypress tree in the garden as well. Here I just want to mention, if you want to change your posture, you're free to do that while I'm talking. If your legs are going to fall off, it's okay. The oak tree in the courtyard, or the cypress tree in the garden. And this is a fine answer. It's easy and perhaps a little bit trite to say in response, well, there was no reason. And when we're engaged in any activity, when we're engaged in a relationship or an endeavor with our work, or whether we're engaged in some kind of even, I think, a political action, because I know that many of our members are involved in relationships and involved in work and involved in all kinds of activities. I think it's very healthy and very good practice for us to ask this question, why? Oftentimes when we're engaged in practice, particularly in Rinzai Zen, in koan practice, one of the first koans that you'll receive if you train with me is, how do you manifest true nature as a rock? And I think that most of us, when we think about a rock and we pick up a rock, we think, what a simple thing, this rock. very plain, very still, very uninspiring or inactive. And we can sit the rock in front of us, and we can look at the rock, and not much happens with the rock. And so as we look at that rock as a human being, it seems not much. And when we look at the world and how we engage with the environment, we don't give much thought to rocks. And yet, the rock has no difficulty manifesting as a rock completely. The rock has no trouble with its purpose. It has no purpose or no difficulty with its direction in life. It has no difficulty with its identity as a rock. As human beings, we're not so lucky. When I was sitting with a rock, I had a tremendous amount of envy. Oh, so in 50 years, this rock is still just going to be doing rock. As we learn to manifest as a rock, then we move on to flowers. How do you manifest as a flower? How do you manifest as a tree? And as we practice more and more, we learn that there are a number of ways that we can look upon something. Many ways that we can make relationship with something. If we're looking at a stone, or if we're looking at a flower, or if we're looking at a tree, there's a very subjective way that we can look at it. And I described this when talking about a rock. Looking at that rock from the perspective of a human being seems so simple, seems so unimportant, insignificant. But as we practice, as we continue to let go of our fixated perspective, our I am self perspective, we begin to see rocks differently. We begin to recognize the rock is not separate from myself. We begin to be able to speak to the rocks and hear the rocks and know the rocks. At the last sesshin, one of the things that I do enjoy doing actually is working with rocks. It started at Mount Baldy because Mount Baldy is just a mountainside that's covered in big rocks, and there was a project that I got put on during work period there, which was to make this fountain. And to do this, it required moving a lot of really big rocks. And so I started to, and they put me there because I think I was big. So we started to move these rocks. The fountain never really worked, but I learned a lot about moving rocks, each rock as an individual. And part of the key to knowing rocks, working with rocks, is really getting to know them. Letting go of our fixated notions of inside and outside, subject and object, and as we're working with the rocks, becoming one with them. When we had the first Zen Center house, which was on Forbes Street, there was some construction done up a side street. And I said, oh, there's all these rocks being blasted there. And so I went up the street, And I looked around, and there was a really big rock, and I looked at it and I said, gosh, I wonder if I could get that to the Zen Center. And I borrowed a fridge dolly, which was just a board with some wheels on it, and I brought that up there. And using the experience and knowledge that I had, I moved this rock onto the thing and then wheeled it down this big hill and around the corner and up my walk and then into the garden and then positioned it and everything like this. And I think I put 3 rocks in that garden. And I'm told that after I moved, the landlord wanted to get rid of the rocks, but he couldn't do it. And eventually, I think he had to rent like a backhoe. So anyways, the point I'm trying to make... Anyways, so also in Seattle, when I go to sesshin, the first session I went, I started playing with rocks there, and I moved a few rocks around, and people seemed to really enjoy them. And over the past 2 sessions, they didn't have any more rocks for me to move, and so I found one that was buried, and I proceeded to lift it out of the ground and then move it across the way. And so it took 2 sessions to move it about 8 feet. And then during one of the teishos, Genjo was telling me that one of Genki Roshi's big kind of passions was moving rocks. And he said that when he was talking about it, he said to Genjo one time that, don't tell anybody, but when I'm moving rocks, I talk to them, and they talk back. And when he said this in Teisho, I actually started to cry, because it was an expression a verbal expression of something that I didn't think anyone else kind of got. Why is the rock that way? Why does it balance that way? Why does it move that way? Why does it look so beautiful placed that way? When we look at a tree, we can look at an object, and we can call it an inanimate object or an insentient thing. And yet, when we look at trees, they grow, and they shape, and they sway. And when we look at a tree, we can step outside of this subject-object. And we can recognize our own nature in the manifestation of the tree. This is the essence of Zen practice. The manifestation or the realization of our nature. And so many of us come and we have missions, and we have objectives, and we have goals, and we have plans about our practice, and what it is we need to work on, and what it is we need to learn, and what it is we need to develop, and all of this kind of stuff. And as we go through our life, isn't it the truth that more often than not, our plans and our provisions and our ideas and our objectives and all of this kind of stuff is the stuff that we trip over most of all? So there's a lot that we can learn in just sitting with rocks, sitting with trees, sitting with the sound of the birds. Why do the birds sing? Zhaozhou, we can say, maybe if we look at this in a very sort of superficial way, we say, gosh, you can almost imagine this as Zhaozhou changing the subject. A monk asked Zhaozhou, what is the meaning of Bodhidharmas coming from the West? Look at that oak tree in the courtyard. But no, this is not what he's saying. What is the meaning of Bodhidharmas coming from the West? The oak tree in the courtyard is manifesting the answer to this question. What is your purpose? What is your koan? How do you manifest your nature? All around us, all the time, there are demonstrations, very tangible, perceptible demonstrations of what it is to manifest completely. So whenever we're in doubt about ourselves, whenever we're in doubt about our direction, whenever we're in doubt about our purpose or how we should be manifesting, all we need to do is stop. Let go of our fixated, self-centered, obsessed mentation and witness the unfolding of this Dharma activity around us as well as within us. Wumen says, if you intimately realize the essence of Zhaozhou's response, there is no Shakyamuni in the past and no Maitreya in the future. So Shakyamuni is the historical Buddha who lived in 500 BC. Maitreya is the legendary Buddha of the future who will lead all beings to awakening. Buddha in the past, Buddha in the future. If we intimately realize the essence of Zhaozhou's response, there is no Buddha in the past and there is no Buddha in the future. Why? When we engage in this practice, this way of being, in which we are completely with the rock or the tree or the person that's standing in front of us, the cup of tea, the sound of the bell, the bird singing, where is the past? Are we thinking about what happened in the past? There's no room in that moment of intimacy. Where is the future? What's coming next? Are we worried about that? There's no room for future in that moment of intimacy. By the same token, everything that's happened in the past has led to this moment. And everything that will arise in the future is born out of this moment. So, there is only the intimacy of this very moment, the completion of this very moment. And in that is the manifestation of Buddha, the one who is awake, completion. The Buddha doesn't talk about Buddha. When we're manifesting that completion, that closeness in relationship, that intimacy, what is there to talk about? Wumen's verse says, words do not convey the fact. Isn't it so? Regardless of whether you've realized this in Zen practice, or you've realized this in an embrace with somebody that you love, or whether you've realized this in the making of music, or in the driving a fast car, I don't care. That moment where subject and object disappear, plus and minus disappear, inside and outside disappear, past and future disappear. There's only this. What is there to say? How do you describe that in a way that someone else will say, "Oh yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about." Oh. Language does not measure the activity. Consumed by words, your life is lost. Often during sesshin, a few days into sesshin, I ask students, I say, okay, so when you get back home, how are you going to describe this experience to your friends? And often there's this sort of like awkward look and then a burst of laughter. Oh yeah, that's a good one. And yet, most of our lives as human beings is really taken up trying to express feelings, thoughts, and experiences that are fundamentally beyond words. One of the things that I've been doing recently at my work at hospice is reading a lot more poetry. And I can say that maybe poetry is close. But even that, even the best poem, it's like 60% maybe. But we spend our lives trying to find better and better words and better diagrams and better explanations. We build great big schools so that we can have classes and more textbooks about trying to describe things that are fundamentally beyond explanation. Stagnating in phrases, you're bewildered. And this brings us full circle to our old friend the emperor, who, taking the words of the sutras, taking the literal words of the sutras, he's become lost in them, attaching to them, attaching to concepts like merit and good and bad, pure and impure. When the words, we have to remember that the words were originally born out of a desire to express the inexpressible. And this is what Bodhidharma points him to in his responses. Vast emptiness. There is nothing holy. Who is this before me? There is no knowing. And Zhaozhou, when he responds to this question about Bodhidharma, what is the meaning of Bodhidharma's coming from the West? Zhaozhou said, the oak tree in the courtyard. Look. Look. Each and every one of you, each and every one of us, again and again, will find ourselves lost, bewildered in words and ideas and thoughts and concerns about me. And as a practice, our practice is simply to find our center, find our breath, stop, look, and listen. The activity of this cosmos, the activity of our nature is exposing itself to us in every moment. And when we find ourselves lost, when we find ourselves confused or bewildered, our practice is simply to stop and witness, experience the oak tree in the garden. Hi. Thanks for listening to the Living Zen podcast. If you follow Living Zen through iTunes, I would very much appreciate it if you would take a moment to let me know what you think about it by rating or reviewing the podcast, so that new listeners can also hear what you have to say. Thank you for your time and for your support.